Welcome back to Fetal Pig Dissection Video 2. In this video, we're going to focus on that internal anatomy in that thoracic and abdominal cavity. We're going to begin up in that thoracic cavity looking at the heart, the lungs, and move our way through down to the reproductive system.
All right. First thing that I want you guys to pick out on the heart is this gland that sits right here. You can always kind of tell glands from everything else because they look kind of gritty and grainy compared to the muscle tissue, which is very solid and fibrous. So this is the thymus gland. It is just over top of the heart, and it is the place of maturation, or it's where some of your white blood cells go to mature when they are developing.
So that means big role in your immune system. Cool thing about the thymus gland, though, as you get older, it begins to shrivel up and even disappear. That means we are making our best immune system when we are children.
Which kind of makes sense because you've never been exposed to anything at that point. So you're having to learn all of these different illnesses out there. So it is the largest when you're a kid. It gets smaller and kind of fatty as you get older.
Like everything else.
Yes. All right, so I'm going to move that thymus out of the way just a bit so that we can see the heart underneath there. Now, the heart in our fetal pigs is very, very, very similar to ours. It has 4 chambers, just like ours does. And remember, you kind of have to turn everything over inside your head. It is not your left and right. It's the patient's left and right. So on the top of the heart, over here on this side, we have the right atrium. And the right atrium is the first place that blood goes to inside of the heart. So that's like sort of our first stop. Underneath that, we've got the right ventricle. And there's a little groove that separates the right and left ventricle down here, so you can see where that right ventricle ends. That means the left ventricle is this part on the other side, which has the point. That's also known as the apex of the heart. And at the top over here, we have the left atrium. So that's where blood goes when it comes back from the lungs and it's full of oxygen. There is a very large blood vessel coming off the top in between the 2 atria right here. That's your pulmonary trunk. So that's going to come and split and take the blood out to the lungs so it can pick up oxygen. And you can also see, up underneath here just a bit, a couple of other pretty important blood vessels. The first one is kind of a darker color right here. This one is the superior vena cava. That's one of the 2 largest veins in the body, and it's bringing deoxygenated blood back from the head and the arms and the shoulders to the heart. And last but not least, we have a pretty important fella right here. This guy, trying to turn it a little bit so you can see the branches coming off. This guy is your aorta. So aorta is the biggest artery that we have in the body, and it's carrying oxygenated blood out to the body. And it does have 3 branches that come off the top. It's kind of shaped like a horseshoe, so it's going to wrap around, and we'll be able to see that a little bit more here in just a second as it goes down into the abdomen. On either side of the heart, we have lungs. And so in the last video, we were talking about the pathway of air as it comes in through the nose and works its way through the respiratory system. This is sort of the end of the respiratory system. Inside of these very, very spongy lungs are those alveoli, which is where the gas exchange occurs. And the lungs themselves are divided up into lobes. And so it's pretty cool. You can see like it looks like they're cracked. That separates those different lobes. And it turns out that you have 3 lobes on the right side, but you only have 2 lobes on the left.
Take a moment, think about why that might be. Why would those left lungs be just slightly smaller than the right lungs?
Got an answer? You're right. It's because of the point of the heart. So the heart does point off to the left-hand side of the chest, and that takes up the space of the 3rd lobe, if there were one on the other side. All right. Lifting the heart up a little bit, and you can see those lungs get down there too. There is another really important blood vessel down here, and this one's nice and blue. You can see it pretty well, hopefully, in the video. This is the inferior vena cava. This is, again, one of the 2 largest veins in the body. This is bringing deoxygenated blood from the trunk, feet, legs, hips, all of that, back up to the heart.
A good way to think about that, so you've got superior and inferior vena cava. If someone is your superior, they are above you, so think things above the heart. And if they're inferior, they are below you, so things below the heart.
You can also, let me move the lung over just a bit. I don't know how well you can see it from where you are, but you can also see that aorta back here again too. Big, huge, thick artery that comes down and works its way to just above the hips before it splits into the iliacs. So it becomes abdominal aorta when it's down in the abdomen. And there's one more tube back here that I want you guys to see. It's kind of brown and squishy and flat. That is that esophagus. So that's carrying the food from the mouth to the belly. So you can always tell the difference between the two because the aorta is still very thick and tough. Arteries are very thick-walled structures anyway, so it's very like stout. And the esophagus is very floppy and collapsed.
Yeah, so remember it stays collapsed unless you're swallowing and things are moving through it. Does anybody remember what that term is for the movement of food through that esophagus?
Oh, pick me.
What is it?
It's peristalsis, when your muscles do the wave.
So rhythmic muscle contractions.
Oh, then we should probably get out more. All right, there he is. There's a solid sheet of muscle that connects to the walls of the chest and separates the chest cavity from the abdominal cavity. And that solid sheet of muscle is super duper important in breathing. Do you guys remember what the name of that muscle was? It's shaped like a dome when you breathe out, but when you breathe in, it flattens out to make space for our air. Remember, that was called negative pressure breathing. We make the space, then the air rushes in behind it.
You're right, it's the diaphragm.
Cool side note, rhythmic contractions of the diaphragm are hiccups.
It's your Jeopardy information for the day.
We expect royalties. All right, so now we're in the abdominal cavity of our pig. And the largest organ that you're going to see in here, just like the largest organ in the shark, and pretty much the largest organ in you too, would be this liver right here. So the liver is also divided up into lobes. You can see where it looks like it's cracked. Those aren't cracks. There's just different lobes to the liver. You know that the liver has many jobs inside the body. We've talked about that before. You can't live without your liver. You can live without lobes of your liver, but you do have to have some functional liver to store your excess sugar as glycogen, or make plasma proteins, or detoxify and purify your blood, or the other 5,000 million things that the liver does for you, produce bile, all that fun stuff. So here is the liver. It is the first organ up here in the abdominal cavity. And it's actually, in us and also in the pig, there's more of it kind of off to the right-hand side of the pig, and it's a little bit smaller on the left-hand side, but it does go all the way across. Underneath there, there's this tiny little pea-shaped structure.
Looks like a deflated balloon.
Yep, because it's kind of like a deflated balloon. That's your gallbladder. And the gallbladder stores the excess bile that the liver produces so that you can help break down fats. So if you have a gallbladder removal surgery, or if you've heard of gallstones, that all applies to this little gallbladder down here. It's just a pear-shaped sac-like organ that just stores extra bile. You can live without it, but you're going to have some digestive problems if you do have to have it removed. Of course, if you have to have it removed, you're probably having digestive problems to begin with. So, all right, on the left-hand side, we've got this floppy bag underneath the liver. That floppy bag is the stomach. It's very muscular. It's very tough and muscular. Remember, the stomach does mechanical digestion and a little bit of chemical digestion for us. And so it has amazing abilities to move because of the different layers of muscles that it has. It can also expand to hold quite a bit of material in us. It can hold about 4 liters. And I know you don't think metric system, but a gallon of milk is 3.78 liters, so a little bit more than that. Just underneath the stomach, we have, it looks like a finger that wraps around there, and that is the spleen in our pig. Spleen is more immune system. It does help detoxify the blood a bit. It takes out any foreign particles. It's kind of like customs for your blood. Your blood travels through the spleen all day, every day, and the spleen has white blood cells in there to help get rid of any bad guys or pathogens that may be inside.
It's also where your red blood cells go to be destroyed after their life cycle.
Absolutely. Remember, red blood cells only live about 120 days. And no, they don't all die on the same day, because then you would too. But you'll listen a few today, a few tomorrow, a few the next day, after they've made that 120-day life expectancy. So this is where they get recycled. Remember, before we also talked about the fact it's very easy to damage the spleen because it's a very thin covering. And you oftentimes can't repair that, so doctors will remove it. It's called a splenectomy. So car accidents, sports injuries, a lot of times falls even, can damage that capsule around the spleen. And then you would bleed to death internally, but the doctors take it out. You can live without it, you just are more likely to have an infection than someone who has one. If we lift the stomach up, down underneath the stomach, kind of in the back of the abdominal cavity, it looks gritty and grainy back here. Remember, gritty and grainy often means gland. So this that looks kind of like, I don't know, cornmeal or sand inside of a pocket, that is your pancreas. Pancreas is really important for a couple different reasons. It is one of the only glands in the body, well, it is the only gland in the body, that is both endocrine and exocrine. So basically what that means, endocrine glands release their products into the bloodstream. The hormones can travel through the whole body, through the blood that way. So it does that. It produces insulin and glucagon, which help regulate your blood sugar. Releases those directly into the bloodstream. But it's also exocrine. Exocrine means it releases its products through tubes or ducts. And it produces a lot of digestive enzymes as well as sodium bicarbonate to neutralize stomach acid, and it passes them through tubes down into the small intestine. People who have problems with type 1 diabetes often have problems with the pancreas not working properly. It's kind of hard to get to, but it's just up underneath the stomach. The majority, oh, my string came loose. The majority of the things in the abdomen that you can notice are intestines. So all this stuff down here is intestines. And remember, just like us, they have a large intestine and a small intestine. All the ones that are smaller in diameter, these guys right here, these are all small intestine. And there's feet and feet and feet of them, but they're held together in one place by this mesentery. So you can see this little membrane that's holding all that together, so it doesn't roam around inside your abdominal cavity all the time. If it was rooting around in there, it'd be tying itself in knots and choking out other organs, and be doing a lot of damage. So we keep those kind of tightly packed inside the belly.
There are about 11 feet of small intestines in our pig. I know this because I've had groups take them out
and measure them
across tabletop. So almost 11 feet in this tiny little fetal pig.
For us, it's what, it was 6 meters?
It's close to, what is it, 15.7 feet?
Yeah.
Close to 16 feet in us.
So it's pretty crazy to imagine that much stuff packed into that little teeny tiny spot that it's in. All right, so there is a place where the small intestine, so I've been kind of teasing it out a little bit here, small intestine is going to come and meet with the large intestine. So here's the juncture between those two. And at the place where these two meet, which on us is on the right-hand side, there is sort of a dead end to the large intestine. This is the cecum, or the blind end of the large intestine. There is a little worm-like appendage that hangs off of ours called the appendix, which you may have heard of before. And that appendix doesn't really do anything anymore but get angry, and then you have to have it surgically removed. Otherwise, it'll burst and cause all kinds of trouble inside the belly. It can actually lead to a life-threatening infection known as peritonitis, where this lining of the belly, the peritoneum, gets infected. So the large intestine, well, actually, let me back up just a second. Small intestine has 3 parts. There is the duodenum or duodenum. That's the first little bit of small intestine under where it meets the stomach.
First 25 centimeters of small intestines, where most of your absorption takes place.
Chemical digestion, chemical digestion, chemical digestion in there. And then the next 2 parts are the jejunum and ileum. I always remember DJ's interesting. So duodenum, jejunum, ileum. That helps me keep those straight. So absorption, absorption, absorption in those other 2 parts. And then the large intestine also has parts. So we've got that blind end cecum that doesn't really go anywhere. And then we have ascending colon, which goes up the right-hand side of our body. Transverse colon, which goes across the body cavity. descending colon, which goes down on our left-hand side. Then it makes this little curly S in our colon, which is called the sigmoid colon. And then the last 20 centimeters is called the rectum, and then, of course, the anus. Large intestine's job is to absorb water and some vitamins. There's not really a lot of nutrient absorption there. It's really just water and a few vitamins and nutrients. So most of the stuff in the large intestine is waste. So it does take that waste on out to be disposed of. So the rectum, which again is the last little bit of large intestine down here, has stretch receptors inside. And whenever it stretches out, because there's waste material inside, it sends an impulse to the nervous system that says, dude, we're full. And in babies, that doesn't even make it up to the brain. It literally just goes to the spinal cord. The spinal cord sends out an impulse to relax the muscles, and babies poop. They have no control over it whatsoever. It's not until you're about, 2 years old or so before you start thinking about it and adding the brain into that equation so that you can realize it's not appropriate to poop your pants 24 hours a day. You need to find a bathroom first. So it's a reflex that keeps you alive. All right, urinary system would be next.
Kidney there, yeah.
Urinary system would be next. Underneath the lining of the belly, in the pig and in you, so this, remember, again, was called peritoneum. So underneath that is where we're going to find the kidneys on our pig. And believe it or not, kidneys are a lot higher than people think they are. Most people think your kidneys are really, really low in your back, but they're actually just up underneath the rib cage. So the rib cage of our pig goes down to about right here. So that's protecting the very top of the kidneys. And in you also. Kidneys are shaped like the kidney beans that you would buy in the store. They do have one side that is convex and kind of bubbles out, and one side that is concave and kind of dips in. That dip in portion is called the hilum. And the hilum is important because that's where we're going to find all these tubes that connect in there. So you can see underneath the lining there's a blue. That's going to be our renal vein. Renal means kidney. There's a pink. There's renal artery right there. And then there's this white muscular tube. And that's going to be the ureter, which carries the urine that's produced in the kidneys down to the bladder. You do have kidneys on either side, so there's another set over here of all those tubes and that other kidney inside of there. With the kidney, when you cut it open, there are a bunch of teeny tiny little microscopic tubules inside called nephrons. The nephrons are the functional unit of the kidney, and they give the kidney kind of a striated or striped appearance on the inside. So around the outside is the renal cortex, and in the middle is the renal medulla, and then there's a little renal pelvis over here on the inside that connects to those ureters to carry the urine away. It carries the urine to the bladder. So this piece that looks kind of like a tongue in the middle is the bladder for these pigs. And they have a muscular bladder like we do, can expand to hold quite a bit of fluid so that it can be released. For the pigs, again, it comes out, this is a female pig, so the urine would be released from that genital papilla. The bladder also has stretch receptors inside, like the rectum does. So when it fills up, sends an impulse up to the nervous system saying there's no more room in the inn. And in babies, the spinal cord's like, let her rip, tater chip, and babies pee. So
You have a bladder that holds about 250 milliliters of fluid, a little bit more in males, a little bit less in females, as males' bladder is a little bit larger.
And there's no uterus sitting on top of it.
Yeah, important to note that in the females, the uterus sits right on top of that bladder. And remember, the uterus is where that growing fetus is going to be housed. So as it grows and that uterus expands, it starts putting pressure on that bladder, which causes those stretch receptors to think they're full.
In real people words, pregnant ladies gotta pee all the time.
But it's not because their bladder's full. It's because that uterus is causing those signals to be sent from the bladder.
Absolutely. It's because there's a baby doing jumping jacks and trampoline moves on the side of it. Not that I'm speaking from experience or anything, but I am. All right. So that's the urinary system for us. And then our last system is reproductive system. This is a female pig. So in our female pig, In the lower pelvic cavity, we have the ovaries, and they're teeny tiny little ovaries. They're smaller even than your pinky fingernail. So it looks like a little pebble right there. That's the ovary on the right side, and here's our ovary on the left side. That's going to house the eggs for our pig. When this pig is born, when you're born as female, you have all the eggs you're ever going to use plus a few 100,000 extras. And then one egg at a time for humans would start to traverse these little tubes on either side. So these tubes are called the fallopian tubes, or you may have heard of them as oviducts, or even uterine tubes. They're all the same thing. So the egg travels, or the eggs in pigs, they actually have more than one baby at a time. The eggs are going to travel down these little tubes, and they're going to meet in the uterus. So you can see where the uterine horn comes together up here, and the uterus would be on into this little kind of cavity down here. And that's where the babies would develop. And of course they would exit through that genital papilla tube, since that's the exit for reproductive and urinary. In males, they would obviously be missing these. The scrotum would extend down into this area, and the testes are down in the back, behind the hindquarters of the pig. And then the penis for the pigs is actually pretty close to the bladder inside of the skin. So we'll try to get some pictures of that and post it for you guys so you can see the male versus female internal stuff. All right, anything you want to add?
I think we're good.
Awesome.
Thank you for joining us.
Toodles.